What you are about to hear is something that the government spent hundreds of millions of dollars and decades of cover-ups trying to completely erase from history. Imagine for a second that your country loses a nuclear weapon. Now, imagine your biggest enemy finds it right under your nose and decides to build a giant, secret mechanical claw to steal it from the bottom of the ocean. It sounds like a ridiculous spy movie, but it happened. And the way they pulled it off will make you question every major news story you have ever watched. But this is just the beginning. The actual shocking part of this story isn't just that they tried to steal a submarine. It is the massive, global lie they constructed to do it. A lie so perfect, so massive, that it completely fooled the entire world and permanently changed the way governments hide their secrets today. Let us go back to a time when the world was standing on the absolute edge of destruction. The year is 1968, the height of the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union have thousands of nuclear weapons pointed at each other, waiting for a single mistake to start World War III. Somewhere in the freezing waters of the North Pacific Ocean, a Soviet ballistic missile submarine named the K-129 is on a routine patrol. Inside this massive steel tube are 98 crew members, fathers, sons, and brothers. They are operating in total silence, hiding from American ships, carrying 3 nuclear missiles capable of destroying entire cities. And then, suddenly, they vanish. No distress signal, no explosion heard on the surface, just silence. Imagine you are the commander of the Soviet Navy. One of your most lethal weapons has just disappeared. What do? You panic. The Soviets launched a massive search and rescue operation. Dozens of ships and aircraft scoured the Pacific for 2 months. They dropped depth charges, pinged their sonar, and desperately listened for any sign of their men. They found absolutely nothing. Eventually, defeated and grieving, the Soviet Navy declared the K-129 lost at sea with all hands. They packed up their ships and went home, believing the ocean had swallowed their submarine forever, keeping its secrets buried in the dark. But here is the twist. The Americans were watching the whole time, and they knew exactly where the submarine was. You see, the United States had a massive, highly classified secret weapon that the Soviets knew nothing about. It was called SOSUS, the Sound Surveillance System. It was a massive network of underwater microphones spread across the ocean floor, designed to listen for the faint hum of Soviet submarine propellers. When the K-129 sank, it didn't just quietly slip away, it imploded. The crushing pressure of the deep ocean crushed the steel hull, creating a massive acoustic boom. The American SOSUS microphones picked up that boom. By analyzing the data from different microphones, American intelligence officers triangulated the exact location of the explosion. While the Soviets were searching thousands of square miles of empty ocean, the Americans knew the K-129 was sitting right at the bottom of the Pacific, about 1,500 miles northwest of Hawaii. But knowing where it was and actually getting to it were two completely different things. The submarine was resting at a depth of 16,000 feet. That is over 3 miles straight down. To put that in perspective, the Titanic is at 12,500 feet. The K-129 was significantly deeper. At that depth, the pressure is a crushing 7,000 pounds per square inch. It is pitch black. The water is freezing. No human had ever attempted to recover anything that heavy from that deep in the history of the world. The K-129 weighed over 2 million pounds. Most people in the military said it was impossible. Let it rot, they said. But a few top officials in the CIA saw the ultimate prize. Think about it. If they could get their hands on that submarine, what would they find? They would find Soviet nuclear missiles. They would find the cryptographic machines used to send secret messages. They would find the Soviet codebooks. It would be the greatest intelligence victory of the entire Cold War. It was a prize worth any price. And so, the CIA launched Project Azorian. If you were the CIA, how would you lift a 2 million pound metal tube from 3 miles underwater without anyone noticing? They brought in the smartest engineers in the country. The ideas they pitched were pure science fiction. Some suggested filling the submarine with special buoyant foam so it would float to the top. Others suggested attaching giant gas-filled balloons to the hull, but all of these ideas failed basic physics. Finally, an engineer named David stepped forward. David was a brilliant but exhausted man, working insane hours, unable to tell his wife or children what he actually did for a living. His idea was brutal, simple, and terrifyingly complex. "We build a giant claw," David proposed, "like the arcade game where you try to grab a stuffed animal, but on a monstrous, unimaginable scale. They would build a ship, lower a giant mechanical claw on a steel pipe 3 miles long, grab the submarine, and pull it up. But this created a massive problem. A ship big enough to do this would be enormous. It would have strange towers, massive cranes, and a huge hole in the bottom to pull the submarine into. If the Soviets saw the US military building a freakish, giant ship and sailing it exactly to where they lost their submarine, they would instantly know what was happening. It would be an act of war. They needed a cover story. A story so loud, so crazy, and so convincing that nobody would question it. And for that, they needed the ultimate distraction. They needed Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes was the Elon Musk of his day, but far more mysterious. He was a billionaire, an aviation pioneer, a movie producer, and by the 1970s, a complete recluse who lived in penthouse hotel rooms and refused to be seen in public. He was known for doing bizarre, wildly expensive things just because he could. The CIA secretly approached Hughes with a pitch. They asked him to pretend that he was building a revolutionary new ship to mine manganese nodules from the ocean floor. Manganese nodules are real. They are little rocks full of valuable metals that sit at the bottom of the sea. Hughes agreed. Overnight, his companies sent out press releases. They held press conferences. They announced that Howard Hughes was going to revolutionize global mining with a massive, state-of-the-art ship called the Hughes Glomar Explorer. The media ate it up. The public was fascinated. Even the financial markets reacted, with other companies panicking that Howard Hughes was going to corner the market on ocean mining. It was a brilliant lie. Do you think the scam was cheap? Actually, it was one of the most expensive operations in history, costing around $800 million in the 1970s, which is over $4 billion today. All of it hidden off the books, entirely funded by the American taxpayer, to build a fake mining ship that was actually a submarine thief. Let's look closer at this ship, the Glomar Explorer. From the outside, it looked like an industrial mining vessel, but its belly held a massive secret. The center of the ship featured a moon pool, a gigantic set of doors on the bottom of the hull that could open directly into the ocean. The idea was to pull the Soviet submarine up from the depths, bring it inside the ship through the bottom doors, and close them. This way, spy satellites looking down from space would see absolutely nothing. The claw itself, secretly named Clementine, was a marvel of terrifying engineering. It was huge, heavy, and equipped with cameras and lights to see in the pitch-black abyss. For years, David and hundreds of other engineers worked in total secrecy. Families were told their husbands were just working on a civilian mining project. Workers who built the claw were kept completely separate from the workers who built the ship. Only a tiny handful of people knew the full picture. In the summer of 1974, 6 years after the Soviet submarine sank, the Hughes Glomar Explorer finally set sail. Imagine the tension on that bridge. You are a civilian crew mixed with undercover CIA operatives. You are sailing a giant, untested, experimental ship into the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Your mission is to steal from your deadliest enemy. And if you are caught, your government will completely deny you exist. They arrived at the target site. The weather was rough. The waves were towering, but they had to begin. They started assembling the pipe, piece by piece. 60-foot sections of heavy steel pipe were screwed together and lowered into the water, carrying Clementine, the giant claw, down into the dark. It took days. Just the weight of the pipe itself was so immense that engineers were terrified it would snap under its own mass before it even reached the bottom. And then the radar operator yelled out, "Company!" A Soviet naval tugboat appeared on the horizon. It was heading straight for them. Imagine you are the captain of the Glomar Explorer. A Soviet military ship is approaching. Underneath you, a 3-mile-long steel pipe is dangling over their lost nuclear submarine. If they figure out what you are doing, they might ram you, board you, or shoot you. The Soviet ship pulled up incredibly close. The Soviet sailors stood on the deck taking photos, watching the Americans. The Americans waved back. They played the role perfectly. They wore hard hats. They acted like bored civilian miners trying to pull rocks out of the ocean. The Soviets watched for days. They circled. They monitored the radio traffic. But the CIA had thought of everything. The radio operators on the Glomar Explorer were broadcasting fake mining data back to headquarters. "Yeah, boss, we're having trouble with the nodule pump today." The Soviets, eventually getting bored of watching a slow, noisy mining ship, turned around and sailed away. They had no idea they were parked directly above their own stolen nuclear submarine. With the Soviets gone, the real work began. Deep in the abyss, 16,000 feet down, Clementine approached the K-129. The cameras fed grainy, eerie images back to the control room on the ship. There it was, the ghost ship, torn apart by the implosion, resting in the silt. They positioned the massive steel jaws over the submarine. Slowly, Agonizingly, they lowered the claw. Contact. The hydraulic jaws closed around the fixed steel hull of the K-129. The ship shuddered. The engineers held their breath. Lift! The massive winches began to turn. The strain on the ship was unbelievable. The metal groaned and shrieked, but it was working. Very, very slowly. The massive dead weight of the Soviet submarine lifted off the ocean floor for the first time in 6 years. 10 feet, 100 feet, 1,000 feet. The crew was euphoric. They were actually doing it. They were pulling off the greatest heist in human history. They pulled the submarine up mile after mile. It took an agonizingly long time. 3,000 feet to go, almost there. The prize was almost in their hands. And then disaster struck. Do you know what happens when you put thousands of tons of stress on cold steel? It becomes brittle. Without warning, there was a violent shudder that shook the entire Glomar Explorer. Alarms started blaring. The dials measuring the weight on the pipe suddenly spun wildly backward. Half of the massive steel claws on Clementine simply snapped off. The metal failed. The crew watched in absolute horror on the sonar monitors as 2/3 of the massive Soviet submarine slipped out of the broken claw. The K-129 plunged back into the abyss. It fell for thousands of feet, crashing violently into the ocean floor, shattering into countless unrecoverable pieces. Silence fell over the control room. The engineers were devastated. The CIA operatives were stunned. Years of planning, $800 million, the perfect cover story, the perfect execution, destroyed by a single piece of bad steel. But it wasn't a total failure. The claw hadn't lost everything. They still had a portion of the front section of the submarine secured in the remaining jaws. They slowly brought the surviving section up into the moon pool of the ship. The giant doors closed beneath it. The water was pumped out. When the CIA and military specialists finally stepped into the wreckage of the K-129, the smell was horrific. They were stepping into a tomb. Inside this crushed, twisted metal, they didn't find the nuclear missiles. Those had fallen back to the bottom. They didn't find the primary code books. But what did they find? They found 2 nuclear-tipped torpedoes. They found some cryptological manuals, and they found the bodies of 6 Soviet submariners. Because the Americans were operating in secret, but still adhered to military honor, they gave the 6 Soviet sailors a formal military burial at sea. They placed the bodies in steel caskets, played the Soviet national anthem, and lowered them back into the Pacific. They filmed the entire ceremony, keeping the tape highly classified. The Glomar Explorer returned to port. Project Azorian was over. The CIA immediately began planning a second mission to go back for the rest of the submarine, but they never got the chance because a completely unrelated random crime ruined everything. In 1974, a group of armed burglars broke into the headquarters of Howard Hughes's company in Los Angeles. They were just looking for cash and valuables, but they stumbled onto a safe. They blew it open and stole thousands of pages of secret documents. Among those documents was a memo secretly discussing the CIA, the Glomar Explorer, and a Soviet submarine. The burglars, realizing they had something massive, tried to extort Howard Hughes. They demanded millions of dollars to keep the documents secret. The FBI got involved, the police got involved, and inevitably, the story leaked to the press. A sharp investigative journalist named Jack Anderson caught wind of the rumor. He started digging. He realized that the greatest mining ship in the world was a fake. He prepared to publish the story of the century. The director of the CIA personally begged Anderson not to publish it, citing national security. For a few months, the press held back, but eventually, in early 1975, the Los Angeles Times broke the story. The headline shocked the world. U.S. reported to have raised part of Soviet submarine. The Soviet Union was outraged. They officially demanded answers. The American public was baffled. Journalists descended on government offices, demanding the truth. Was it true? Did we steal a submarine? Did we spend nearly $1 billion on a fake ship? The CIA was backed into a corner. If they said yes, we did it, the Soviet Union would be humiliated and forced to retaliate, potentially sparking a war. If they said no, we didn't, they would be caught in a massive, provable lie, completely destroying their credibility. They needed a magic phrase, a legal loophole that allowed them to say absolutely nothing while sounding official. CIA lawyers sat in a room and drafted a single sentence. It was a masterpiece of bureaucratic deflection. When journalists filed legal requests for documents about the Glomar Explorer, the CIA sent back a piece of paper with this exact phrase: "We can neither confirm nor deny the existence or non-existence of the records requested." Read that again. Neither confirm nor deny. It was genius. It offered no information. It admitted no guilt. It provided no lie. It was a complete psychological wall. This phrase became known as the Glomar response, and it didn't just disappear after 1975. The Glomar response became the absolute gold standard for government secrecy. Today, police departments, intelligence agencies, and militaries all over the world use this exact phrase to block journalists and hide the truth. Every time you hear a politician or a spokesperson say, "We can neither confirm nor deny," you are hearing the ghost of a fake mining ship, a giant mechanical claw, and a stolen submarine. The Glomar Explorer itself, it sat rusting for years before being repurposed as an actual deep-sea oil drilling ship. It spent decades drilling for oil, its crew walking on the exact same decks where CIA operatives once hoisted a nuclear submarine from the abyss. It was finally sent to a scrapyard in 2015 and torn to pieces. As for the K-129, the rest of the submarine still sits at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. The crushing darkness swallowed it back up. Whatever secrets were locked inside its main hull will remain there forever. So, what is the real takeaway here? Is it the incredible engineering, the bravery of the men involved? No. The most chilling part of this story is the realization of what power can achieve when nobody is looking. If a government can invent a fake global industry, partner with an eccentric billionaire, build a massive, unprecedented ship, and steal a nuclear submarine from the bottom of the ocean, while making the whole world look the other way, what else have they done? What massive, unbelievable operation is happening right now, hiding behind a perfectly crafted news story? Think about the biggest news headlines of the past year. Think about the massive corporations making strange moves. Are they real, or are they just the modern version of Howard Hughes mining rocks? The next time you see a story that doesn't quite make sense, or a government spokesperson refusing to answer a simple question, remember the Glomar Explorer. Remember that sometimes the most ridiculous, unbelievable conspiracy theory is just the truth they haven't been forced to admit yet. And until they do, they will neither confirm nor deny.